Einen wunderschönen guten Morgen und herzlich willkommen zu
Good morning and a very warm welcome to this virtual press conference for aquanale 2021. My name is Alexander Königsmann. I'm a journalist and I have the pleasure of taking you through this digital press format here today. We have a press conference together. I hope you're doing well, you're sitting comfortably and you're looking forward to what we've got to say. Well, aquanale is the international leading exhibition for pool and sauna. It is the world's largest event of its kind and a must for everybody and anybody who deals with pools, saunas and ambience as a profession. It is only here in Cologne that all market partners and anybody gets a comprehensive overview of what's new technologies, product innovation, process optimizations and visionary planning. And as you can duly expect from a good press conference, there's obviously the option of putting questions for you. And if you have a question that pops to your mind, then send it to you in writing. We've sent you email addresses for this purpose, and we're showing them here again. It's for all guests who are watching it from within Germany. It's aquanale.presse@kölnmesse.de, and for all the international audience, it's aquanale.press@kölnmesse.com. So please don't shy away of adding your questions to the list. Please free to bombard us, as the phrase goes, and then we'll respond to them in the process later on. But let's look at the last aquanale 2 years ago. Well, so much as a palate teaser 2 years ago, and it's a bit melancholic, really, one has to say. You see these masses of people meeting. Ute van Schura, she is the general manager of the National Association for Pools and Wellness, and Matthias Pormant, the vice president, Trade Fair Management of Kölnmesse. Great to have you. Well, thank you. In this slightly different ambience. Well, it's beautiful. How many press conferences and digital events have you attended this year? Well, a handful, I'd say, by now. Yes. Matthias, for you? Well, I think a handful as well, because we have some trade fairs that we actually carried out digitally. I mean, I had a sheer digital format and I'm beginning to get used to this format, but I do look forward to having people back in the halls properly. Yes, that's true. We just saw the images of 2019. Now, the most important question, obviously, is, besides the fact that we're all standing here and staring at this, will there be an aquanale in October? Yes, definitely. And I think that's my best news for today. We absolutely assume that we will have an aquanale in October 21. We'll basically have had good signals from the political sphere, so within North Rhine-Westphalia, and the economics minister has given us the go-ahead that when the incidence rates stay low as it is, that we can have this trade fair after the holiday. At the moment, we have an incidence rate of 20.8, and if that continues to be the case, then we'll obviously even be in a position to have a proper trade fair again, a hands-on one, as it were. And obviously vaccinations will gather momentum, so we very much assume that we will be able to put on aquanale, but it will obviously be different from what we saw in the trailer. Now, obviously, things are going to look slightly different from what we've seen there, but everybody really feels curious what it's going to be like when we attend real live events again. It'll obviously not be like in that trailer, and one can imagine that the one or the other is going to feel a little hesitant or nervous of walking into a hall like that, or even exhibiting there. Well, obviously we'll have to respond to a lot of regulations, keeping one's distance, obviously. Having a lot of space is very important. Well, technically, trade fairs actually mean networking and getting together, and people would obviously love to be closer than 1.5 meters apart. But I think very early on we have reorganized the planning so that we can really carry out trade fairs under difficult conditions. We have widened the aisles, for example. We have wider floor spaces for booth and for the settings in there. So if people have any questions, obviously we help them with information. Then we obviously have our own areas that we design, catering areas, and trade conference formats have to be wider, larger, different from what we had them in the past. So it needs to be proper, reliable planning. So everybody needs to be worried that they'll walk into basically a crowd of people who could be dangerous for them. Obviously, it's important that people have a good feel-good factor, and we want people to come to Cologne that they're not worried. And that is why, for quite a while, we have been communicating under the hashtag Be Safe for Business. That's our safety and health hashtag. And I'm sure the one or the other of you have already looked at this. Now, in the autumn last year, we have set up a trade fair scenario. We said, let's try to show what a trade fair could do to be working under these settings. And basically, we were just said, how can you do a trade fair under COVID-19 conditions? Now, it's obviously slightly differently from what we had in the past. Everybody needs to make sure they do their bit, keep your distance, wear your mask, bear in mind to be safe. I think this thing with distances is basically something that's become normal, but unless you're in a small studio like this where you have to force yourself to stand where you are, but you've also got a smartphone app that you can use to regulate flows of visitors. Well, we have actually done lots of steps towards more digitization. We basically have a mere digital entry option via a new app that we've created, and at the same time we have an app where we can see where the traffic is within a hall, for example, that when it gets too full we can intervene directly. We basically send people into a different area. We say go into hall 7, there is something really interesting happening there, so that we basically channel flows of visitors there. Well, the one is obviously the look at visitors and interested people. Then there's the question in the world of exhibitors. Have you felt that they were hesitant? I mean, what is the state of affairs there? How are the bookings looking? Well, I can't say it was like it normally is. I mean, obviously there was a great degree of uncertainty, but one thing that really is important for aquanale and also the sales marketing process of last year, we have an industry that is very strongly behind this event, and you can see that from the registrations, Fluira, Riviera, Pool, Speckpumpen, Spec Pumps, Grando, Fluvo, OSF, Benke, Dryden, Friese, Roller Solar. I mean, lots of things. I had to write them down to make sure I remembered them all. But we also have, if you knew, was Veron Boch, new name. That is a trigger, really, and is effective, certainly for press contacts. Please feel free to contact them. And one thing that is also nice, we have EWA villages. I mean, in, this year that'll be in Hall 8, but they've already been had for Aquarena, Claves, Roik, Movie Mission. I mean, there are also companies who haven't always attended, who have said no, definitely in 21 we're there and we'll be there. But the need for communication is different. I mean, companies are looking forward to this event, and we do find that motivating. Well, that is certainly good to hear. I mean, firstly, for companies, for Köln-Messe as well, but Ute, to involve you into this conversation, it is good for the industry too, isn't it? Because if many exhibitors come back to aquanale and are present here, are you similarly optimistic to Matthias regarding October? Well, we too are very optimistic, I can say. I mean, if you look at the registrations, for example, then we can't say that there are no longer large spaces in the sense that you'd have. I mean, it's more or less booked for the space we have, and we all haven't met for a year and a half. I mean, it's an industry that normally meets quite happily and regularly. So this is an industry that gets together for seminars, for sales events, for field staff training, things like that. We love to celebrate, and that hasn't happened for a year and a half. So everybody's hot to trot and is looking forward to this. And I think there are only a few things we need to bear in mind. Well, you still have to be careful you don't hug one another and keep a little bit of a distance. Well, we'll try. Well, but what was the development last year? Well, we'll have to say, in contrast to the event industry or the trade fair industry, we did not have any economic disadvantages. I mean, that is beautiful. But lots of people were at home, home office, homeschooling, and I think it was understood to be responsible to stay home. And that is why many people invested money into their homes and gardens, and that was something that benefited us, but also other industries in and around interior decoration, architectural things. We actually came in when it became obvious that there was no summer holiday, and the Germans, who are travel champions, were stuck at home, couldn't go anywhere, had to stay home, and then people actually saw their holidays falling flat, and she who could afford it then built their own holiday oasis in the garden. Well, that applies to me, actually, I can say. I mean, the pool in my garden needed to be, I mean, and all neighbors around us did the same thing, so I can just confirm that from my own private experience. Do you think is that trend going to continue? What are your forecasts for the next few years to come, also in the long run? I mean, what is going to be important for this private wellness trend? Well, first, I'd say 2020 was a very exceptional year, and our trade companies didn't give themselves a break, so they basically wanted to make sure they could cater to as many customers' wishes as possible. They were completely overloaded, so the craft shops didn't so much have the problem that I want more customers. It's more about long delivery periods, high raw materials prices, availability of products and materials, and well-experienced staff is far and few between. So I think there's going to be a little bit more of an effect from the Corona years, 2020, 2021. But then at some point, I think demand is going to decline and normalize a little bit more. I think that's logical. But I still think that we're talking about an industry that has a future in the medium and the long term as well. Let me mention three different things here. I mean, firstly, this trend of homing, of cocooning, of having a great time at home. That isn't just the case since Corona. I mean, this trend is one that we've noticed ever since the financial crisis in 2008, that people basically withdrew into the home area and made sure they had it nice at home. A pool, a sauna, a wellness oasis fits perfectly for that. And a second aspect is the increased awareness when it comes to health, because your own pool isn't just there to let the kids splash, but you can also use it as a fitness studio for yourself. I mean, all those people who had a pool was happy when all the public pools had closed and the fitness studios had shut. And I think people really enjoyed having that. And the third aspect is individualization. I mean, today's customer very much wants to determine themselves for themselves. He doesn't want to basically stand in a long queue, doesn't want to only be able to go to swim when the swimming pool is open. I mean, if you have your own pool that a craftsman can do for you, and then you also have your unique own setup. Yes, I think we'll talk about what the designer trends are for this a bit later on. But I mean, not everybody has a gigantic garden and therefore the opportunity of putting such a pool into the garden, having a private wellness oasis. Some people have a roof terrace or a balcony. What are you doing for those? Well, that's something that our industry also noticed. We are SME dominated, so we can flexibly and quickly respond to changes within the market. So, I mean, that is that topic of urbanization that you talked about. People are moving more into the cities, plots are becoming smaller, and therefore, during recent years, we saw a trend that you could call a mini pool. I mean, pools that are smaller than the larger alternatives, but by having a special whirlpool installation or special light effects, underwater lighting, things like that. So you can actually use those pools in small spaces. Swim spas and whirlpools are two smaller alternatives to that effect if you don't have that much space and only a little garden. Or such a rubber band, you can basically put that around your middle and it then pulls you back. Well, we certainly will have much better alternatives to a rubber band on aquanale. I can promise you so much. Well, Matthias, I had already said aquanale is the lead event for the industry, but is still competing with other expert exhibitions of this area. So what's its current status? Well, as you've just said, it is one of the leading trade fair events for this industry. And for us as trade fair organizers, it's always great if we have partners like the BSW, for example. So basically, we have the huge trade fair halls, and we need our partners to fill all of this with life. And aquanale is a great example for a very good cooperation. Well, our target is to bring aquanale to the very top, and we're nearly there. Now, till end of October, we're all on the final meters of the race. We must all carry on to make the effort, and basically making it to the next level of the league table is always more difficult than just maintaining a spot. But we have BSW and other industry players who are all supporting us. We basically have FSB as well, besides aquanale, for open spaces, movement and sports facilities. We'll have the trade fair, press conference tomorrow. Well, I mean, we already had that last year, so we basically have a whole area in aquanale that formerly used to be in FSB only. We have a different hall set up to make things easier for our visitors. But basically, these two trade fairs form a duo that is mutually complementing. So we firstly have pool building planning, but we have architects who are also going to make offers again at FSB again, but who we have as visitors on both trade fairs. So therefore, this dual approach, this double, is actually very appealing. Now, as a very important content-based module, we have the International Pool and Wellness Forum. Possibly you should say something about that, Ute. So what can we expect there in October? So the International Swimming Pool and Wellness Forum is one that covers the whole area of the industry: public bath, private bath, and hotel spas and swimming pools. I think there you can see we're working together with different partners here. So we as BSW are obviously there with our focus on private bath, and then we have the IAKS, for example, but BDS, the Association of German Swimming Masters, and the International Hotel Association. I mean, all of those associations are part and parcel of this concept. They suggest speakers and they address subjects that are important. And we've got the first draft of the program up and running, and it's very mixed, and there's something there for everybody. And well, firstly, we've got pandemic-specific contents, for example, for the swimming masters. How can I organize swimming classes and swimming tuition under the conditions of a pandemic? But then for the operators of hotel pools, for example, how do I rule and regulate? How do I set up my guest management? How can I make sure that there are no viruses in the air in my pool areas? But then also things that are more generic. We talk about sustainable building in public pools, topic of digitization and saving energy. And I think for private baths, we have a content module, technical installations and law. We've won over a lawyer and an expert surveyor, and both of them are talking about problems on the construction site to make sure that one can learn from mistakes that others have made.
And that we also know, okay, this might have been conceived in a different way and also planned in a different way. Okay, I well imagine. That sounds like an interesting talk. And besides, as usual, there is also subjects that are spent over all different subjects relevant for all visitors, like HR management, HR development. How can my staff become resilient? This is really important nowadays. And this is rounded off by architectural awards and swimming pool awards. And we're quite proud to congratulate and thank Matthias Pohlmann, because the European Swimming Pool Award will be carried out in the International Swimming Pool and Wellness Forum. We're very excited and looking forward to that. Thank you very much to that. And you addressed many subjects that we'll also talk about in concrete terms, especially the sustainability and environmental aspects, as well as design. We'll highlight that later on, and you already mentioned it. So, of course, we're also intensely working around the private areas of each individual. Not everybody can afford a private pool. Some need, let's say, public pools. And you were talking about IAKS, the International Association for Sports and Leisure Facilities. And I talked to Mr. Kannewischer, president of IAKS. And we were talking exactly about this subject. Welcome, Dr. Kannewischer. Very nice that you could take the time. Good afternoon, Mr. Königsbaum. We already heard about it. In the private swimming and wellness area, we still have good business, even though we're in pandemic situations. However, we have major restrictions in public pools like other industries have. Could you give us a short overview on the current situation? Yes, of course. I mean, it's a major challenge for public pools. I mean, already during the first confinement, we had to close down again. First, we closed down for 3 months, and then ever since November, we were closing, but now we were opening again. In swimming pools, we work with fixed costs, and this is why it is a major challenge. So we have certain running current costs. We can't empty pools, and it can also come to consequential damage. So we have high fixed costs. And of course, there were subsidies available that were quite appealing. But last not least, it would have been a good compensation, but these subsidies arrived late. Partly December subsidies only arrived now in the beginning of June. And this is a major issue and has been a major issue for the industry. Okay, now we're in the lucky situation that incidence rates are going down and there are many openings, many confinements are stopped. What is the perspective in public pools, thermal baths, sports pools? Do you have any estimation on when we will go back to normal? Well, step by step, public pools are opened. Well, first of all, it's open air pools and it's interior areas. And I'd say if you do things repeatedly, you should have more routine. And I'd say this is not the case. It's not really structured. I can say from each individual federal country, we have different regulations. Sometimes there are announcements made by politicians and the decrees are not even written. And then they say you can open tomorrow. But of course, a public pool needs a lead time of 1 week to get started. And of course, this makes it difficult. I mean, we're a safe area. We weren't closed because we have an increased infection or viral rate. No. Our water is always hygienically improved. We have very strong ventilations with 6-fold air circulation per hour. And in other public areas, you only have 1 to 1.5-fold air circulation. So pools are regularly safe, but we were usually the last ones who could open again. And as I said, rules are very different from federal state to federal state. And then opening according to incidence rates is also a difficulty. So in my own pools in Baden, politicians said can open, and then there was a small incident, and then one day before we could actually open, we had to stop our preparatory work. We had worked for that all the time and even cleaned everything. But well, now there are some difficulties, there are some concerns when we're opening again, but we are going to open and we're looking forward to say hello to our visitors again. Public pools are not only a mere leisure time activity for summertime laying back hours, but especially public pools also contribute to the fact that people are really moving, become sportive. And this is also something that people couldn't do. I see that in my family, that for 1.5 years, there was no swimming class at school. And at the same time, I feel that ever since COVID-19, people stop moving and are less into sports. So do you think that the pandemic has changed their thinking? I do not necessarily think that there is a rethinking, but I think COVID-19 has put a focus on that. Sports was only feasible in public spaces like running, bicycle riding. Of course, it's nice to be in nature, but of course, joint stress is relieved in swimming pools, and learning swimming and exercising also wasn't possible. The German Life Saving Association, DLRG, also trains children. And sometimes there are some incidents. And of course, it is important to train people, to have them exercise. Safety is important. And this is why it is also key for public swimming pools to come back, to open again. And the societal added value is absolutely clear. And we're very lucky to open up again quite soon. Dr. Kannenwischer, I'd like to wish you all the best. Thank you very much for this talk. I hope that the entire industry can return to normal again. Thank you very much for this discussion. Thank you. And as I said, we already we already registered this interview 3 days ago with Dr. Kannenwischer. Thanks indeed for that again. And the trend is a mega trend: individualization, making yourself cozy at home, and making it very special. So for quite some time, well, we've already built a pool. Maybe I'm not even allowed to say that. Well, we're not mentioning any company, any manufacturer. So we've got this big pool. But if I wanted to go for an individual pool, the big question is, what do I have to pay attention for? And we invited an expert, Dick Spierenburg, designer, and I hope that he can share some recommendations. Mr. Spielberg, thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure, thank you. And we were just talking about it, the private pool, which may be some reverie, some dream, illusion, unaffordable. What do you think? No, an own pool is a dream for everybody who likes to relax in the water, who likes to swim jointly or individually. So maybe a small pool, maybe a big one. There are no limits, and it is always an uplift of your private life at home. It also fits the mega trend for indoor and outdoor movement and sports, because the limits between the interior and the exterior movement is somehow almost neglected nowadays. So if it's necessary, we stay at home, but if possible, we go outside. Okay, and what is the tendency right now? Could you describe what the state of the art reveals right now concerning swimming pools as a designer? An architect. Well, let me highlight an example, because my own pool is connected to a lake. And I laid out a swimming pond going into my private property, where you can control the water with a natural ambience and atmosphere, water atmosphere. On the other hand, if you like to really swim long distances, it is very good to have a swimming channel, so creating length or even creating a round pool, so that it can swim to and through. There are many possibilities with smaller and bigger pools in the private area to add something and uplift your private life. Let's assume I'd have the available area for building a nice swimming pond or pool, or I'd like to exercise, and I also have the necessary amount of money. What do I have to pay attention to when planning such a project? Well, of course, I think it is something for professionals. I mean, everybody can orient on what is available on the market, see what are the materials, shapes, ideas, and additional features I'd like to use. So do I want to illuminate the water at nighttime? Do I want to create a water movement? So create, let's say, taking down in writing what you need is maybe a good idea, but then, of course, it needs to be a landscape architect who plans everything, to fits it into your garden, to makes it look nicely and matching your natural garden ambience. As an architect, I love to cooperate with landscaping experts, because they always add something really nice. Okay, and we were already addressing it. Have you realized that in the past year, more happened in this direction? Of course, absolutely. Now, you find so many different materials available. It's not only the blue basin, but nowadays you work with different materials that are in line with gardening, stone, timber, and these are all subjects that you find in the interior, like white bathrooms are now going into timbered floor and timbered basins, or nice stone interior, and both the exterior pool and the bathing zone inside are areas where you stay longer, where you relax, where you also want maybe spend time together. And this is why it is so important to create a good ambience. Mr. Speenberg, thank you very much for this short insight into your work and the current trends and tendencies. What is state of the art and what is fashionable for pools, for garden pools. Please stay with us, because I just highlighted it. All our spectators have the possibility to ask questions. Maybe you can answer one or two later on. Thank you. So, I would like to draw your attention to the following fact. If you have questions, please be so kind to send them to the email addresses that we showed again. And after the press conference, we'll try to answer all questions as comprehensively as possible. And now we would like to focus on the subject of sustainability because we are going green, sustainability, environmental friendliness. Maybe you don't have to talk about Fridays for Future all the time, but the pool and wellness area in leisure time is also consuming a lot of energy. What is the state of the art, or what is the status quo right now in the swimming pool industry? Well, for us, it is, of course, a very important subject like for everybody else. And this is why in recent years and even decades, many things have changed. So a pool is not consuming as much energy as it was in former times. Let me give you one example. So a pool coverage as energy saver number one needs to cover every pool, which is a very simple thing. You cover the water and can save up to 80% of energy. And there is also another number that I got from the Grundle company, and they calculated if you use a swimming pool cover regularly in the area period from May to September, you can spare 12 tons of CO2. And this is what you need in order to do a world tour with a medium class car. So using coverages, well, you can have, let's say, simple foils. You can use timber decks that you can use as a terrace, but you can also roll up foil. So it is definitely an energy saver, and this coverage is used to keep warmth in the swimming pool, but also generating heat has developed into the future, like, for example, heat generating pumps and absorbers. And here you need some energy efficiency, and you need also to protect our resources in order to heat the water. And in general, I can say that swimming pools built by our craftsmen are as follows. Mr. Spierenburg was just talking about landscape architects. Of course, they are really important, but if you want to have a swimming pool, you also need to turn to a swimming pool expert, and you can find them on the bsw-web.de webpage, where you can find swimming pool experts that can support you in building one. Many have a cooperation with landscaping architects, but the swimming pool builder is the expert that you should turn to. Well, if we didn't want to say that we can do it ourselves by any means. And swimming pool experts are craftsmen, professional craftsmen, and this is not a one-off thing they're doing that you throw away after one season. So, of course, they focus on the longevity of their material, and it's not like, let's say, for a small swimming pool that you were thinking of, well, it's already 3 years old, so it's sustainable for our children. And products also develop into the future, like pumps are more energy efficient, and digitization also supports us because products are connected nowadays, they're well matched, and they consume less energy. And another aspect I'd like to highlight is that the swimming pool industry is nowadays working on a European energy standard, which involves consumers and raises their awareness for energy consumption. And this also reveals our position and our striving for being energy efficient when building a pool and running a pool. Yes, otherwise it's not viable into the future, isn't it? No, of course, this is true for all areas, may it be transport, may it be installation at home or leisure time and wellness. Of course, you have to take this into account as well, and good to hear that there are various opportunities. Okay, Matthias, when listening to all this, what are your expectations for the October Trade Fair? So would you want to get some inspiration from there for your own wellness area? Well, my expectation, Alexander, I can say this is true for our entire team around Bettina Friers as well. We are so much looking forward to opening the trade fair again. And the people with whom we connected virtually, we couldn't see them recently in the past 18 months, and we're so happy to welcome you in Cologne with also a Cologne beer. Maybe we would really look forward to that, and we have great support from the industry, and this is really motivating. It's great fun, and we're working even harder than we might usually do it. So this is the expectation I would like to share with you. And we must say that aquanale was the last trade fair in the industry before COVID-19 and will be the first one to open again under COVID-19 conditions or after COVID-19, and this is definitely a momentum. When you look around, you see all the inspiration, and even if I can't put this in place at home, I know from my experience that aquanale provides so much inspiration. I love being in the water, so I think it's very exciting also to look at it. Thank you very much for that, and now we'd like to answer your questions. Let's have a look on this intelligent tablet where all the questions come along. So, Matthias, once again, another question to you. You may not believe it, but it seems to be true. So, will aquanale FSB take place? We said yes, of course it will. But maybe you can address that again in how far this is going to be possible, some details. So politically, well, an incidence rate of 20 right now might be good, and then many people will be vaccinated. The question is how will be organized on the spot, and there is also a novelty. We have the 3G rule, that means the 3 hygiene rules. Will also be applicable here. So either I have recovered from COVID-19, I was tested negatively 48 hours ago, or I'm vaccinated, and 2 weeks have expired. So we're now waiting of how we can somehow reveal these things as a proof in an app or within the ticket. But as we're using a digital ticket, this information will be bundled. But this is important, meaning those people who have not been vaccinated so far can come to aquanale, and visitors have less travel restrictions than those who might go on holiday. That will also add on. So, of course, preconditions are there, and exhibitors are waiting, and aquanale, FSB, they will take place. And what would be the worst case?
Well, worst case would absolutely be, and we have had that experience before, the worst case would be that we have a ginormous fourth wave, for example. We notice this is just not possible to organize a trade fair within. Then all exhibitors get every penny back. They can step out of their contracts. We are not going to pulling anything into subsequent years. I mean, there we're very clear and transparent. When we cannot hold the event, then we cancel, and then everybody gets back what they've paid to Kölnmesse. But we obviously, I mean, that would be an absolute worst case scenario. We're really not hoping that that will ever come to bear. And it isn't looking like it at the moment either. I mean, at the moment, we're talking about June. Vaccination numbers are increasing by the day. And it sounds very much like everything is going to go well. But, I mean, you've just said something about the registration process for visitors regarding COVID-19, so possibly more in concrete terms. So basically, obviously, you'll have to register up front, best case. You can also do it on location, but it also has to be a digital registration. You cannot go to the till, basically, and pay your ticket there. But basically, I mean, you can pre-register, then you get a QR code onto a new aquanale app, and with that you can actually enter the trade fair premises contact-free. I mean, the topic of cloakrooms or a suitcase that you don't want to drag throughout the trade fair, there is going to be a free-of-charge cloakroom, so that basically we don't have any queues building, and that people actually have it as comfortable as possible, so that they can get very quickly into the the halls very quickly and directly. And this contact-free basically means that you can get in easily at the entrances, but it also allows for good contact tracing afterwards. So at the end, we scan the visitor. We basically can say to the person, we'll just scan your QR code. I can actually just scan the QR code, and I can send my information to that visitor afterwards because I've got their contact data and address. Well, a question to both of you. Interbart has cancelled their trade fair for this year in September, and they will just go for a congress format. What do you say to that? Well, I obviously do not really want to comment on what the colleagues in Stuttgart are doing, but possibly let me home in on why we think aquanale can take place. Well, we have developed our measures very early on, and we have thought about how it works. We've built the village as to show this is how a trade fair can work under Corona givens. Really, we basically started working early on. Lots of exhibitors said, oh, by then everything is going to be fine and hunky-dory again, and clear then it wasn't. And we said, oh no, so we have distances, wearing your mask, looking after hygiene, all of those things. I mean, we addressed that with our potential exhibitors and said, well, what does that mean for the individual trade fair booth? So we were really close to people there. And this really is something that is giving certainty for people. But yes, they show a whole plan, and I can see who has booked. I mean, who else is there, so that people are committing themselves, companies are committing themselves, so that there is a real proposition for this to come into fruition. Well, Ute, what do you think? Would you rather go to a congress? No, of course not. No, I'm really very, very happy that Aquanale is the first trade fair that will be happening, well, I can't even say post-corona, but at the end, hopefully, of the corona pandemic, and can happen as a live trade fair. Of course, Stuttgart, I mean, they can take their own decision. Then we don't have to say we think it's good or bad. I mean, it's their decision. But what I find good for industry and its players is that Stuttgart, who normally, or let me say it differently, Interbart were in the even years, and we were in the odd years with Aquanale, and Interbart basically 4 weeks before us have jumped into the odd year. Well, some people have said they've smuggled their way in and wanted to stay there, but they then noticed it's better also for industry that they don't do this, but they go back into the even numbers. And I think that certainly is a very positive message, that we can say Aquanale in the odd years and Interbart or a congress in the even-numbered year. Well, thank you very much to both of you for everything you've shared with us here. I'm looking into this, but I don't think there have been too many questions. I've just heard we have a little intranet problem. So if you have just shot us a question by mail just now, then unfortunately it's been swallowed by something in the internet. But what we will definitely do is, you've sent the question by email, so it will definitely reach us, and we will definitely answer. You too will do this. So, I mean, no question is going to stay unanswered, but we can't do it for you here live in this program. So thank you very much up to this point. We look forward to October. We hope everything is going to go hunky-dory and really well. And I look forward to seeing you. Thank you for having been here. And for all of those of you who are watching at home, stay safe, stay healthy, and come for October.